How's it going, guys? My name is Maikya and welcome back to another video. Now today we're going to be discussing a theory surrounding the Norse mythology and Norse god Odin. So we're going to be talking about Pokemon Sword and Shield and some theories around the god Odin and how he links to the series. So if you guys haven't already, be sure to smash that like button down below because this video is going to be pretty damn great. And be sure to subscribe down below for more videos like this in future. And press that little notification bell just there, just down below. And that should notify you when I upload next. So I hope you guys are ready and let's get started. Right, so today we're talking about the Norse god Odin. Now Odin is commonly associated with war, royalty, sorcery and healing and many other different ideas. So he's got a lot of things going for him as a god. He's not really a god of a specific thing, but more a overall enveloping god of everything to do with Norse mythology. Mostly now he isn't really mentioned apart from in some Scandinavian civilizations, but mostly he was around the time of the Germanic people and the Roman Empire and how, they were interacting with each other. He was a common ideology within those civilizations and belief systems. In the Old Norse myths, he was depicted with one eye, so he lost his right eye within a battle, I believe. He also had a long beard and was frequently seen wielding his spear, Gungnir. He was also accompanied by many animal companions and familiars, and many of those were including his wolves and his ravens, which we're going to be talking about today. So his two wolves were Geri and Freki, and his ravens were Hugin and Munin. So he obviously has quite a few animals surrounding him, but these are the ones we're kind of talking about today. So obviously the first interesting thing we see is that in the Pokemon Sword and Shield logos we see two wolves, which could be seen to be related to Geri and Freki. The fascinating idea about this, although it's not related to the Pokemon Sword and Shield logos, the actual translation from Norse to English is ravenous and greedy, which I don't really know if that means anything, but it totally has some kind of connotations of war and that sort of thing. Now, another similarity from Pokemon Sword and Shield can be seen within the ravens. Now, in the starting sequence of the Pokemon Sword and Shield trailer, we see a lot of birds flying above the starting town, and beside this town lies a hill giant. Now, the interesting thing with this hill giant upon the hill is that it can be seen as having one eye. The figure itself, the actual hillside giant, appears to be raven-like or bird-like in structure. It has this sort of strange beak and this kind of back comb sort of thing, sort of like a chicken, but not really. Now, this could be referenced to the ravens themselves, or it could be referenced to birds in general. Now, what's interesting is the translations for Hugin and Munin is thought and memory. So these are two contrasting ideas because obviously you come up with a thought and then that's stored in your long-term memory or short-term memory. So they're kind of one process that leads into another and they do two very similar things, but they're also very different. Now, in contrast to this with the wolves have themes of war and greed, whereas the ravens are almost seen as wise and cunning and planning. So it's kind of these two contrasting ideas which you see in Pokemon Sword and Shield as well. You've got the sword, which attacks, and the shield, which is defensive and more aware. Now, the interesting idea as well is that Odin can be seen as the Raven God, which also gives this idea some credibility. Now, another mythological text argues that Odin, his wolves, and his ravens represent the hunt. Whilst Odin represents man, the wolves represent the dogs or the actual usage of an animal to hunt another animal, like a predator hunting a prey. And ravens were seen as indicators of animals on the hunt, so they're kind of like spotters. They'd find an animal and then they'd basically call out to the dogs to come and attack the animal. Now, this idea straight away implies that Odin is some kind of representation or symbolization of mankind. So we can see that obviously there's some links to this idea that he is representing mankind and these wolves are kind of our companions. So this idea is that the legendaries could be our companions. Who knows? This is just speculation. Now, here is another interesting idea. This goes into actual language and actual origins of words and that sort of thing. I hope you guys really like this bit because I'm quite interested in all this bit now. Now, the interesting thing here is that the word Wednesday in English language actually comes from the word Odin. The word derives from Old English Wonesdag, which follows from the Old Norse Odin's Daga. All of these derive from the Proto-Germanic language Vodensdag. So that's obviously Wednesday, but it's in the Proto-Germanic, so it's where our English language comes from mostly. It's where the French language comes from and the German language. and anything European, that sort of thing, all comes from the Germanic language. Now, the interesting thing is that Vodensdag is not where it stops. There is Vodensdag, which is actually a Germanic interpretation of the Latin saying Dies Mercurii, which means the day of Mercury. Now, the interesting thing is that in French, the word for Wednesday is mercredi, which is very similar to Mercury. So it can be seen that the day Wednesday, which is Odin's day, can be seen as Mercury. Weird, right? Now, here's where it gets even more weird. So the popular Roman writer Tacitus wrote some kind of stories about the Germanic people and Germania, and in there he included a quote about Odin being Mercury, being their god Mercury. Mercury was the messenger. In Greek mythology, he is Hermes. In Roman mythology, he's Mercury. They're named after the planets, well, the planet's named after them. And it all links well with the cosmos, and Norse mythology links to the cosmos very, very strongly. So it can be seen that Odin is a representation of Mercury. He also said that Thor is seen as Hercules, and Tyr is also seen as Mars. So there's very, very close links between the Norse gods and the Roman gods, and the Roman gods and the Greek gods, and they all link very, very closely. Now, the interesting thing is that Julius Caesar actually did some writing about the Gauls, not the Germanic people, the Gauls. And this is where Tacitus kind of got his saying from. Now, the saying goes as followed: they consider the gods only the ones they can see, the sun, the fire, and moon. Now, that's quite interesting when you think about it for just a second. Okay, we don't know what the fire is, but we certainly have the sun and the moon. Generation 7 was sun and moon. So we already know that they've considered the gods the sun and the moon, and the fire itself is Odin, which could be seen to be sword and shield coming up. So we obviously have this kind of speculation, this theory, following on through from languages and mythology. Now, another interesting thing is in Let's Go Generation 7, where Sun and Moon were the actual main games for, we actually saw a release of a new Pokemon that actually has some very close links to Mercury. Can you remember what it is? It's Meltan and Melmetal. Now, Meltan and Melmetal are really, really, really obviously linked to Mercury. Now, before we go back into that a little bit, let's just talk about our hill god for a second longer. So, the hill god obviously represents Odin in some way, the one eye, the beak, the raven god. What else does it remind you of? Well, when you think about it, it could be another form of Melmetal. Melmetal has one eye. He's linked to Mercury in some way. He uses sparks. He has obviously got some kind of links in that way, and it looks very similar. Now, could it be argued that Melmetal has some sort of form, like a godlike being, like a sort of god, a sort of controller of the country, of the region? Now, is the one eye in Meltan and Melmetal referring to Odin the one eye? And is the Mercury itself referring to the god's name and status? We don't know, you see. It could be argued that it is. So that's kind of like the idea I've had. Now, we have another perspective with relation to the hill giant, in the argument that Odin's realm is in Asgard. Now, Asgard, if you didn't know, was the Garden of the Gods, is one of the 9 worlds surrounding the World Tree, which is very, very commonly seen in a lot of theories related to the Pokemon franchise, which I'll go through in just a second. Now, the Hall of the Slain, also known as Valhalla, is Odin's hall in Asgard. The theory is that when men die in combat, they are chosen by Odin to live in the Hall of the Slain. Now, this is them in preparation and getting ready to fight in Ragnarok, which is a giant war that Odin takes part in. Does that sound familiar to you? A big giant war that someone takes part in, a godlike figure, very similar to the 3,000-year war from Kalos. Now, another interesting idea, before I move on to that little war theory, this hole stands before the tree Glacier, a golden tree. Now, on the roof of the hole, we can see that there are golden shields encrusted into the ceiling of the hole. Does shield sound familiar to you? Do you see what I mean? Does that sound just too familiar some ways? Now, the interesting thing is that, like I said before, there is Asgard, in which this Hall of the Slain is based in. And Asgard is actually run by Odin, by chance. What would you believe it? And like I said before, there's the 9 worlds, and one of them is Asgard. Now, this can't link anymore, can it? But it can. But like I said before, the World Tree is a common conception that we see in Pokemon again and again. Each legendary takes inspiration from the gods and the demons in the different parts of the World Tree. Monsters and regions all have their own links and themes that all connect to the World Tree. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, guys, but if you want to see more detail about it, go check out Birdkeeper Toby. He has a really, really solid, almost series, a few videos on this kind of idea. and he discusses it in a very, very, very well-mannered way. So go check him out and be sure to leave some support there. But let's carry on with this theory just a little bit longer. Now, seeing how this all links, we can argue that Galar has been created on purpose as a kind of way to understand the other side of the war 3,000 years prior. So obviously we have AZ. AZ was the king of Kalos and took part in the war that basically created peace and harmony across the Pokemon world. Now the interesting thing is that Kalos had an ultimate weapon, but could it be argued that that ultimate weapon was a sword and it was a destructive weapon? And Galar was the one that was actually trying to defend against said weapon, and this giant hill monster actually became the defensive, the Odin shield, the shields that we saw in Asgard. Could it be that this was Odin, and Odin was the one who fought against AZ and defended the Galar region from any chaos? Could it be that the ultimate weapon was linked to Ragnarok, and that the little men we see around the figure on the hill, could they be the fallen from the Hall of the Dead, the Hall of the Slain? Now, I'll be theorising about this more in future. Let me know if you guys enjoyed the video. Be sure to leave a like down below, and like I said before, go subscribe and press notifications if you guys want to be alerted when I upload something like this next. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you guys had a wonderful day. I'll see you very soon for another theory.